Good morning, everybody. I'm David Ballman. I'm the Director of Culture for the Department of Economic and Community Development. And I'm going to add this appearance to my resume, particularly since I have something very important to announce, and that is the lights are on a Toyota Camry, license number 966LBY. This could save somebody a lot of trouble. Did we find you? We found you. Terrific. Thank you all for being here. You're an incredibly important part of this transition that we are in the process of. As you know, the Commission on Culture and Tourism ceased to exist on July 1st when the Office of the Arts was moved into the Department of Economic and Community Development. And the process that we're going through to revamp, restructure, and make incredibly more effective all of our arts funding across the state is what this meeting is all about. And we deeply appreciate your being here to help us with that process. With that, I'm going to introduce Michael Ross. I'm sure you all know Michael, the Managing Director here at Westport Country Playhouse. Michael.
David. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. I'm just here to welcome you, because we should have a few more welcomes, shouldn't we? I'm here to welcome you into our home, into our space here at the Westport Country Playhouse, home to, I think, some of the finest theatrical productions in the country, obviously, as well as that we host a number of performances of family children's theater that we do here at the Playhouse, as well as a play reading series curated by our own Annie Keefe, who's here with us today. We do those productions, those performances all year long, and there are many, many, many of them. But in addition to doing that, this campus in 2011 hosted an additional 237 different events here on this campus, in this theater, in our smaller barn as well, and in many rooms here. Many in partnership with a lot of the organizations that are actually sitting out here today, in partnership with Neighborhood Studios, Housatonic Community College, and certainly the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County. We're proud and happy to be partnering today with the Department of Economic and Community Development to host this as well as part of the thing that we are, not only home for theatrical productions, but certainly a gathering place for our entire region. So now let me introduce the star of our show today, the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, Kip Bergstrom.
So, the art of placemaking. One thing that occurred to me while I was listening to the welcomes was it was such a great idea that we are doing these forums in producing and presenting theaters because they are emblematic of art as an engine of economic development. In fact, the reason why so many of them get earmarks is that they are engines of economic development. The earmarks originally came from a diversion of the meal tax revenues to localities, and the localities could in turn decide what to do with that money, and many of them decided to put the money into what they thought was the goose that was laying the golden egg, the venue that was generating the meals out, and therefore the meal tax. So that was its history, and then when the diversion of funds to localities was phased out and went into the general fund, a lot of those were grandfathered, and that sort of gave us a foundation of earmarks, and then it's expanded from there. The funding we're talking about today is not that funding. In our budget of roughly $15 million, $12 million is earmarked and $3 million is competitive. I think it's a little out of balance, to say the least. We'd like to see it shift more over time, but that's a conversation for another legislative session, the one next year. What we're talking about is the money that's not earmarked, the money that goes by and large to smaller organizations, and the money for which anyone who's getting an earmark is not eligible. That money is currently granted through a fairly overwrought process that determines eligibility, and if you make it through that process, then what you get is derived by formula. And what we're talking about doing starting July is moving to a structure where we issue grants on a competitive basis based on impact. And we are going to put twice as much money on the table to do that as has been available in past years. And we're doing that for two reasons. One is that the General Assembly actually gave us more money than the governor asked for in the last biennium. He was reducing our two competitive grant lines by 500,000. The General Assembly increased it by $1 million, so there was a net increase of 500,000 there. And then on top of that, in the past, when tourism had no money, we were using one of those grant lines to fund tourism. Now that it has a $15 million a year marketing budget, we don't have to do that, so we put that $1 million back in, so we have substantially more money, twice as much money to put into these competitive grants than we've had in the past. We just issued a new round of general operating support grants that extend everyone who was currently receiving one for another 12 months, so basically through December of next year. The new monies will become available for July, so basically what you have a situation is a base level of funding, then the ability to get money on top of that while you're still using your base level of funding. We did that quite deliberately to make this transition to a more project-based funding more graceful for the organizations that we've been funding in the past. We have no bias about the size of the organization or the size of the place where we fund. What we want is to have art be an engine of placemaking and economic development. So this is the proposition, basically. Great art makes great places attract great talent create great jobs. Now, art creates jobs directly. This theater, both through the meals that folks coming to the theater have before and after, and those jobs in those restaurants, the actors who work in the theater, and the whole supply chain of a production theater is a significant amount of job creation in and of itself. But the potential of a producing or presenting theater or a art organization of any kind is actually much more significant than the direct jobs that it creates and the indirect jobs through things like folks buying meals that are coming to the performance. The impact of the art is on creating a community of creative people that then creates an economy. And the mechanism by which it does that is it makes places cool and attractive to young talent that's mobile, chooses to go to a place, and then being in that place creates the next economy. So it goes from art to place to talent to jobs. And Anne Marcuson in Creative Placemaking put it this way. In creative placemaking, partners from public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical and social character of a neighborhood, town, tribe, city, or region around arts and cultural activities. Creative placemaking animates public and private spaces, rejuvenates structures and streetscapes, improves local business viability and public safety, and brings diverse people together to celebrate, inspire, and be inspired. Now that's a very broad swath of the role of arts in placemaking, but I actually don't think it's even broad enough, because it implies in a way, and some of her other writing and some of the work of organizations like the New England regional arts group, implies that the creative economy is just arts and directly related industries, when in fact, the creative economy is much broader. It includes a good part of research, invention, whether artistic or scientific. And the difference between the core of art and some of the other creative activities is art has the ability to coalesce these other activities around it, more so than the other ones do. So art is the yeast that rises the dough. And the piece of this proposition that I want to focus a little bit on is the talent piece. So the challenge for the state, and I would say for every art organization in the state, is to attract young innovators, college-educated folks between 25 and 35, and even more specifically between 25 and 30. They are the folks who will create our next economy, and they are the folks who will create your next audience. We move around the most during that decade, after we've finished college and graduate school, while we're going through a series of first jobs and first relationships. Then we start to settle down and choose a place, often creating a household, and then we tend to stay in that place. And there's a huge amount of movement during this period of time. So any given place in the country, think of it as like trade. You have imports and exports of talent, and your net surplus or deficit is a fraction of the overall volume of trade. So a given city might have 30,000 young people moving in and 30,000 moving out, and might have a net deficit of 3,000 or a net surplus of 3,000. It's that kind of relationship. And the role that these young people play in cross-pollinating ideas from place to place, invigorating networks of innovation, is so crucial that it's actually better to have a lot of trade and a small deficit than a small amount of trade and a surplus. The volume of trade in young talent is what energizes places. Why is art critical to that? Because this young talent likes to be in places that are infused with art, that are cool places to live. The sweet spot for Connecticut and our cities, and it's mostly the cities, when they, right up until the time that they're choosing the last state they're going to live in, they're choosing to live in city neighborhoods over suburban or town or village neighborhoods about 2 to 1. So we either win or lose the battle for this mobile talent in our cities. Of course, the flip side of that is a third of them are choosing to live in towns and villages, so there's definitely a play for this group at that scale. Once they've settled, they often, more often than not, will move from a urban neighborhood to a suburban neighborhood, but by then they've already chosen whether or not to live in a place. In that first 5 years, 25 to 30, they are going to where the largest number of jobs are and the largest pool of potential partners. Those are the big cities. So during that first 5 years, we have more of a deficit than a surplus. We still trade in that age group, but the New Yorks and the Atlantas and the Washingtons and the Bostons get more of them than small cities like Stamford, Bridgeport, and Norwalk do. Once they get to around 30 or so, and they've had a couple of jobs, and they've partnered up with somebody or decided not to, then they start to think about downshifting. Maybe it's as simple as I want to live in a place where I don't have to share an apartment with a bunch of goofy roommates. You know, I want my own place, or we want our own place. But the place they want is a place that meets a kind of coolness threshold, but still isn't done yet. It's a work in progress that they can help make cooler. And they believe that a small city has more potential for that than a big city. They can have impact. They can be part of making it. We totally give away our advantage in that age group if we don't let them in, if we don't let them be part of making the city. So we have to have an attitude of inclusion and openness and access in order to seize the opportunity. Think about it. If this is when people move and make their choices and you had two hands that you could choose from, one was you're really strong in the first 5 years or you're really strong in the last 5 years, much better to be strong in the last 5 years. We have the advantage, but we can give it away if we don't let this group in. Now, the other thing I would say about placemaking, you could call it audience development. You could call it market development. It's the answer to the question, how does the live experience stay relevant in a place, the live local experience stay relevant in a place where in an hour you can be on Broadway or at MoMA. And with a click, you can have direct access to an artist unintermediated by a gallery or a venue. How does the live experience, the live local experience stay relevant in that context? One way is to deeply engage the local community in your art. So great art makes great places, but great places also create the market for great art. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's not the only way that you stay relevant, but it's a key way to stay relevant. So what we think we're suggesting is not out of sync with what most of you are doing and want to do. And we're not presuming that anyone's not doing this. You know, art as placemaking started when the first artist put brush and paint to a cave wall in the Cave Lascaux. I mean, art has been making place for, what, 20, 30,000 years. This is not a new idea. It's what you do. We want to blow on that spark and help you do more of it. It is in your financial interest to do this as well as the interest of your community. So enough kind of general intro. I just want to show you some things. This is the Project Storefronts in New Haven. It's one of the two projects in Connecticut that got an Our Town grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. What they do is they take empty storefronts, which they get for free from the landlord, and they put an artist or artisan into that. This is a group that takes wood that's cut down by the city and makes it into high design city benches. You see them doing it. They sell from the store. What's happened in every one of these cases is the storefront that was empty becomes immediately desirable. And they've now had to put clauses in their agreements with the landlord that they can be there for at least 90 days, because otherwise there would be somebody wanting to lease that space sooner than that. It's created markets for the artists. Think of that you would have enough of a market for art that you wouldn't actually have to subsidize it. It's in effect accelerated into 90 days the cycle of urban renewal, where artists colonize unsafe, dodgy places, make them edgy, funky, cool places that attract gentrification, that then prices out the artists, and those places become generic chic places. So they've collapsed that 10-year cycle into 90 days. Part of my mission in life is to figure out a way out of that trap, where we build long-term affordability for art and a diversity of people and uses into our places as we develop them, so that we don't make everything generic chic. And I think it's a work in progress, but I want to prove that we can succeed economically without losing our soul, despite, you know, overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And that's part of what we're up to. So I spent some time in Providence, was there when WaterFire started. There's a whole story of Providence that starts with Antoinette Downing having stopped the wrecking ball on Benefit Street. Institutions, as you would think, as enlightened as Brown and RISD, were going to tear down one of the most significant stretches of 18th century architecture in the country and put generic classroom buildings up on it. So that, she stopped that. It gave Providence residents a sense that they were a place that mattered, that was worth preserving, that had a sense of civitas, as the Greeks would call it. And that inspired a couple of RISD professors to have this lame-brain idea that you could uncover the river and move the railroad tracks and do all this stuff. And then Chafee, Senator Chafee, John Chafee, got control of Public Works, was able to hijack the money for Route 6 and use it to execute on that idea. All of which would have been for naught had there not been Barnaby Evans to bring that incredibly beautiful landscaped public space to life through waterfire. It's an amazing exercise in group contemplation. There's music that he directs. You don't know where it's coming from. Very contemplative. The fires are all just specific kind of woods. They're fed by folks all in black. And people of all ages are moving along the banks of the river, totally silent in contemplation of this spectacle. So, art as placemaking. Austin, Texas calls itself the live music capital of the world. I just did some focus groups there last week, and I know that these folks think they are the coolest, hippest, most progressive place in the world, and the fact that it's not like that in the rest of Texas just makes them feel more exceptional. And there's a lot going on there beyond live music in terms of a technology base. It's art and science, but it starts with live music. Art as placemaking. Infinity Hall is onto this. They're going to take a page from Austin City Limits. They're going now to 60% of the public television stations around the country with live at Infinity Hall. Over 250 live music performances there a year in a beautiful, historically preserved building, another kind of placemaking. Festival of Arts and Ideas in New Haven. There's festivals of a smaller scale like it. It's another kind of arts as placemaking. A couple of weeks ago, we launched something called City Canvases to kind of build momentum for this initiative and give folks an idea of what it could be. This is a public art project in New Haven where these images come together only if you stand in exactly the right spot. And it's really cool, and it gets you walking around New Haven. These are some images of public, this is, you know, it can be whimsical like this. It can be small little details. This is just a piece of a stairway. This is the power of illumination to bring bland or scary places, make them into magical places at night. And that can be done at an intimate scale. This is the Stanford School for Ballet. These three ballerinas are sitting on the steps of Old Town Hall in Stanford where these where the school is located in the basement and the mezzanine. Now the rest of that beautifully restored building is going to be the Stanford Center for Innovation. So you're going to have these high-tech entrepreneurs and innovators mixing it up with ballerinas. It's just an amazing juxtaposition. Now these three girls, one of them's going on, is now a sophomore studying biology at UConn. The other two are in degrees that mix art and technology. So they're embodying the mix of the convergence of art and science that's taking place around them in that space. This is a small school, ballet school, making a huge impact on placemaking. So this happens at all scales. Last week or the week before, the commercial side of the arts community, the advertising agencies, the PR firms, the digital media folks and the like, got together and decided, we're tired of going to New York. We want to have our businesses be in Fairfield County. We want to grow this sector. And so they created this thing called the Fairfield County Creative Corridor. So right as we're talking about engaging you in placemaking, the private side, the private counterpart to you is organizing itself to grow here. And so I put that out there as a potential idea for you guys to play off of. So that's my introduction. What I want to do now, we're going to have a plenary, and I want to give you a couple of minutes to just think about this question. Write down your thoughts on creative placemaking as you think about it, as it pertains to the state or your region, your community, your organization, the work you do. And I'll give you a couple minutes to just think about that, write down a couple of sentences, and then we'll have a little bit of a plenary discussion before we go into a group discussion. So start writing. While you're doing that, I just want to explain the method to the madness of this breakout session. I have this theory that ideas have a life of their own. They like to go out and play. They like to dance. You need to try them on, just like you try on a dress or a suit. You have to browse ideas. And the way you do that is not by listening to me. My big theory is that people do not learn by listening, they learn by talking. So we're going to do, the most of today is breakout groups and tables of 8 where we want to get you talking about this idea of art as an engine of economic development and placemaking and the creation of vital communities and the bringing of art to new venues and bringing new art to your existing venues, market development and placemaking. And we're not necessarily looking for pearls of wisdom to come out of today. Today is the start of a 2-month process that we're going to collect your ideas and use those as input to the creation of grant guidelines that will then enable us to fund those ideas. So we're not going to tell you what art as creative placemaking is from the top down. We want that to come from the bottom up. We're hoping that your ideas, which we fund in July, we'll issue grants in April, a solicitation, we'll get back your proposals in May, we'll make the decisions and start funding in July. We hope that your projects are going to be so compelling that we can go back to the General Assembly next year for a significant increase in arts funding. So the doubling that we did this year by moving monies around is just the start. We hope we can make the case through the work you do that art is such an engine of economic development that it makes sense to put more money into it. I think you have better ideas. I'm betting on the fact that you have better ideas than we have questions. We're not necessarily looking for those ideas to happen today. If they do, that's great. We're hoping that they'll emerge over the next couple of months, and then through the applications you submit to us, you come up with compelling projects that can really blow the roof off of what we're talking about and cause the political community to invest in art in a way that it hasn't done before. That's the game plan. So I think I did enough talking while you were writing that you might have had time to come up with some questions. So we'll just, questions or comments? Anyone want to get us started? Yes. Yes.
Your question about attracting 25 to 35-year-olds sort of means you have to have affordable housing for them to live in.
Yes.
And that seems to be a big assumption, especially since the rental market in Norwalk and Stamford is some of the highest in the country. So I wonder if your initiative is tied into the, addressing some other regional problems like affordable housing, smart growth, mass transit, that kind of thing.
Yes. So art is essential, it's not sufficient. It's essential, it's not sufficient. So that if we're going to attract young talent, we have to weave together the threads of hip, affordable, green housing. I think a sparkling mix of the old and new in terms of styles, of architecture, a vibrant public realm, and a fine-grained focus on walkability and bikeability with local transit. It needs all of that. It needs all of that. What's different about art than those other things is that you can do it more quickly. It's the thing that most quickly transforms and creates momentum for the other investments. But we're working in parallel to put our historic preservation funds in the same place we put our arts funds, to put our affordable housing monies in the same places we put those two, and to use the whole engine of the state's tourism apparatus to have outsiders cost share local experience, art and otherwise. So it's all of that. It's not just art, but today's conversation is art. I'm equally passionate about all those other dimensions and working on those in parallel.
Okay, you have another one.
Yeah, Kip. Hi. Philip Elias off Fairfield University. Can you see me, Kip?
Yeah.
Okay. The problem that I see, and I think everybody here in the room is on board with the idea, the concept, it's thrilling, and it's absolutely doable, but we have an anomaly here in Connecticut, and I think that part of what we should think about as a group, and in terms of implementation strategies, is that we have an anomaly in that we don't have, you have this urban-suburban dichotomy. Certainly Fairfield County is almost the model of that. The lack of a cohesive county government system. Connecticut is one of 2 states in the Union lacking a county government. So we want these places to be transformative and hip and cool, of which suburbanites will enjoy going downtown South Norwalk 20 years ago when John Cusano was down there. But we have to try to figure out ways to almost thrust the state into the leadership role, to be the glue that's going to level out the playing field between the needs of the cities, these urban spaces that absolutely need to be remedied and need to be all the beautiful ideas you're presenting. But we have to somehow find mechanisms to engage the suburban audience and to say this is going to enhance the urban blight that we're looking at.
Right, and I would say, by the way, that we have a county government in Connecticut, and we have a county executive. We just call him a governor. That there are 100 counties in the U.S. that are larger geographically than Connecticut, and 5 that are larger in population. And the state does need to play the role that a county plays in other places. I agree with you.
Anybody else?
Great ideas for these empty retail storefronts and everything. What are you guys going to do to convince the property owners to lend us the spaces and help us bring these empty storefronts to life? Because I know in Stamford downtown there is a lot of resistance to that, and it takes a lot of convincing and the right landlord to make it happen.
Is Margaret Budell out there somewhere? Is she here today?
No.
So Margaret Budell was the one who conceived of and drove Project Storefront. So we're hiring her, and we're hiring Rod France. And the 2 of them are going to drive the City Canvas project. But there'll be and we want to use that, we're actually we launched this a couple of weeks ago. We asked for letters of intent. Last Friday we got a dozen cities that are saying they want to do this. We hope we can fund all of them. We're going to execute these projects this spring and create momentum for it. But we have put the resource of Margaret and Rod on the table to help cities figure that out. She figured out how to do that in New Haven, how to get landlords to give her the space for that project. So while they're supporting these mural-based and illumination-based projects, they're there as a resource to help think beyond that. So take advantage of that.
Over here.
Where?
Hi, I'm Don Raynone, Executive Director of Neighborhood Studios in Fairfield County. used to be Music and Arts Center for Humanity, it's MOC, and we've been the recipient over the last 5-6 years of general operating support grants from the Connecticut Commission on Culture and Tourism and competitive funding for programs. And we believe in the competitive grant process, and we're very good at it. However, I feel as an arts educational organization and as an artist, there's a catch-22 here. In July, we can piggyback through programs that I can create right next door in Washington Park and the east side of Bridgeport to certainly draw attention to the blight of that area and to enhance and work with the mayor, Finch, to bring public art and programming in some sort of project that we would submit a grant for. However, the next year comes around, we lose our general operating support. I think it's very important that you take into consideration that you don't pursue a public arts process that would endanger arts education survival, the kind of programs that provide that to the children of Bridgeport, for example, who get maybe 22% of art education a year.
Right. So the money that we're putting on the table in July is not for public art. It's for art of all kinds, including arts education. But it's music, it's dance, it's visual art, it's sculpture, it's theater, it's writing, it's all art at all scales, neighborhood, village, town, city. It's the City Canvas project is not taking money from the general operating support. We're able, because of shifting monies around, to be able to fund that for the next 12 months at the level we funded it last year and do the City Canvas project. Come July, we're going to be able to put twice as much money as was on the table for general operating support. You can do the combination. And we're leaving the endowment, which is another source of general operating support, just the way it is now, which is about almost equal in size to the general operating support. So half of the current funding of general operating support will be in place on an ongoing basis beyond next year and the year after. That will keep going. There will be a piece of it that will become competitive, but we're doubling the size of it, just for starters. We hope to go beyond that. And we're allowing for a very hefty administrative piece, 35%, because I know you can't live on project funding alone, so we're enabling a kind of general operating support through the project funding. So I think there is a way for each of you to come out ahead in this model. Go ahead.
Gary Disher with the Greenwich Choral Society. Just with so much of the emphasis here on trying to attract talent and such, what have you got, or is there a corresponding program that's actually working with the business community that's actually looking to employ that talent?
Well, yeah, let me just, so the two or three sentence summary of the Connecticut economy is that we're very long on very large, mature, slow-growing companies, and very short on young, fast-growing companies. And there are many elements that we need to work on to increase the number of young, fast-growing companies here. And we're, later this week, launching an initiative called the Innovation Ecosystem to create innovation hubs in several places that are meant to catalyze and accelerate the growth of young, fast-growing companies. As they grow, one of the critical resources that they need to grow is young talent. So they will be keenly interested in this initiative and will feed off of it. And as the example of the Stanford School for Ballet, it will feed off of them. So, I mean, they'll reinforce each other. So, yeah, those two sides of the equation both are under my portfolio at DECD, the innovation economy, art and history, as well as the kind of branding and tourism thing. So we can create the place while we're creating the companies, and then we can market what we're doing. It's all under one umbrella. It all fits together as one whole. That's a new thing.
Kip, hi, Fritz Jellinghouse. how do communities like, I'm just making this up, Westport and Old Lyme, with extraordinary histories and contemporary activities in the arts, participate if they either don't have the capacity for or the interest in great economic development and new jobs?
Well, I think this plays out at a variety of scales. I mean, this place that we're in right now is an engine of economic development, not just for Westport, but for the whole region. Your Lyme Art Academy in Old Lyme, as well as the Florence Griswold Museum in Old Lyme, are engines of regional economic development and can be players. I think in some cases, it involves partnering with other organizations and collaborating in innovative ways. And, you know, I really do leave that to you to figure out. But it's also the case that placemaking is not just an urban thing. If we don't get it right in our cities, we lose the game. That's sort of an existential threat. But we also need to get it right in the cities and towns. They are also part of the mix that attracts talent, and they need to kind of constantly be refreshing themselves with newcomers. So I think it changes with scale, but it works at all three scales, city, town, and village.
I wondered if you'd comment. My name's Jamie Dickinson. I wondered if you'd comment.
And where are you from?
Maritime Aquarium.
Great.
On the eligibility and disqualifications for the program.
Well, the fundamental one is that if you're getting an earmark, you can't get this money. That's probably the most significant thing for you to know, because this is the money that's available for, you know, the hundreds of organizations that don't get earmarks versus the 24 that do. So I guess that's the simple answer. But the rest of it is something that will come from the work we do together over the next 2 months in this region and 4 other regions to identify the opportunities and needs, and then we'll craft guidelines around those. We don't have those guidelines set. We're going to develop them from the bottom up. And I think we're done, time-wise. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Odenak from the Cultural Alliance Fairfield County. Happy to be hosting today. This is the beginning of a conversation, and not only will you get to break out and talk today, but the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County will be organizing some smaller forums over the next months to bring you together and to continue the dialogue, and we will be able to have input into the process, as well as just to begin thinking about how things might happen. You'll be getting emails about it. We'll be working, in the case of Fairfield County, with Housatonic Valley Cultural Alliance on some of these meetings, and I think it'll be, you know, a great opportunity. Let's see, what else? We'll have at least, you know, 3 to 4 of those going out in the spring. Right now, I'd like to introduce John Cusano, who is from the Office of the Arts, and he'll just kind of give you the logistics about the breakouts.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everybody. So we're going to break out now to our table discussions. Each of you have a number on your name badge. The facilitators have their table number there. And let me ask you to just look right now. If you don't have a number on your name badge, then please, out at the main registration desk, head there and we'll make sure that you have a table to be at. Each table will have 8 participants, although there are a number of no-shows today, so more than likely we're going to consolidate. So some staff are going to be perhaps moving you to another table so that we have tables that have a little more energy than 3 people. We're really set for 8 people at each table with a facilitator, so we're going to improv that. Each table will have about 40 minutes for the conversation. Your facilitator has a sheet of prompts and questions that will be used, and they'll set the ground rules for you. They'll be asking for a note taker and someone to time. There are 16 tables. I'm not sure we'll use all 16 today, but there are 4 different locations for the tables. Tables 1 through 7 are in the White Barn, which is right outside and down the walkway through a set of white doors. Tables 8 through 10 are in the main lobby, which is right out across from the registration desk. And tables 11 through 13 and 14 and through 16 are upstairs. So that's just these stairs, stairs at the end of the hallway here. When the table discussions are over and staff will be around and give us our, time up signals, we want to move you back down here as quickly as we can, because we're going to have some top ideas that we're going to share in a quick idea sharing to end the day. And so you'll have staff both on your way to tables and on your way back that are going to help to point you in the right direction. So we're really ready to go. So I want to move you to tables right now. Thank you.